Chapter 1 of Dave Dashaway, the Young Aviator, or In the Clouds for Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Danaker, Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Dave Dashaway, the Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. Chapter 1, Dave Dashaway's Model. You don't mean to say that newfangled airship of yours will fly, Dave Dashaway? No, it's only a model, as you see. Would the real one go up, though? It might. I hope so. But this is a start anyways. Yes, and a fine one, said Ned Towner enthusiastically. You're a smart boy, Dave, and everybody says so. I wish my dear old father was living, remarked Dave in a tone of sadness and regret. There wasn't much about sky sailing he didn't know. In these times, when everyone was so interested in airships, he would be bound to make his mark. The two manly-appearing youths stood in the loft of the dilapidated old barn of Silas Warner's place in Brookville. It held a workbench and some tools, and on one end of the bench was the model at which they were looking. It was neat enough and intricate enough, being made by a mere lad, to have attracted the attention of any inventor or workman. An outsider, however, would have been puzzled, for while its shape suggested a bird kite with an umbrella top, it had so many rods, joints, and levers that a casual observer would have wondered what they were all there for. Dave showed a good deal of pride in his model. It had cost him all his loose change to buy the materials to construct it, and many a busy hour during the preceding few weeks. He sighed as he turned from it with the words, "All I need now is some silk to cover those wings. That finishes it." "Then what will you do?" "Well," replied Dave vaguely, "then I hope I can find some practical airship man who will tell me if it's any good." "Say, it will be a fortune if it works, won't it, Dave?" exclaimed Ned. "Oh, hardly that. They are getting up so many new kinds all the time. It would get me in the swim, though. All I want is to have a chance to make the acquaintance of some experienced airman. I reckon the flying fever was born in me, Ned." "Well, that's quite natural," responded Ned. "Your father must have been famous in his line, according to all those scrapbook articles you showed me the other day. Anyhow, I'm getting tired of the dull life I'm leading here," went on Dave seriously. "I'd like to do something besides slave for a man who drives me to the limit and amount to something in this world." "Good for you!" cried Ned, giving his friend and chum an encouraging slap on the back. "You'll get there. You're the kind of boy that always does." "Hey there! Are you ever going to start?" rang out a harsh, complaining voice in the yard outside. Dave hurriedly threw an old horse blanket over his model and glanced out of the window. "It's Mr. Warner," he said, while Ted made a wry face. "I'll have to be going." Old Silas Warner stood switching his cane around and growling out threats as Dave reached the yard and crossed it to where a thin, bony horse and an old rickety wagon stood. The vehicle held a dozen bags filled with potatoes, every one of which Dave had planted and dug, as his hardened hands bore proof. "You'll quit wasting my time, Dave Dashaway," carped the mean-faced old man, "or there's going to be trouble." "I was just showing Ned about the loft," explained Dave. "Yeah, fine lot of more valuable time you've been wasting there, too," snorted old Warner. "I'll put a stop to some of it, you mark me. Now then, you get those bags of taters down to Swain's warehouse and back again afore 6 o'clock, or you'll get no supper. There's a lot more of those taters to dig, but an hour or two this evening will finish 'em." Dave's face was set and indignant, but he passed no more words with the unreasonable old man who called himself, and was in fact legally, his guardian. "I'll keep you company as far as our house," said Ned, as Dave got up into the wagon seat, and he climbed up beside his friend, heedless of the grumblings of the old man about overloading. "He's a pretty mean old fellow," flared out Ned as they drove out of the yard and into the country road leading towards the town. "It's the talk of the neighborhood, the way that old miser makes you work." "I wouldn't mind the work if he would only treat me half human," replied Dave in a subdued tone. "It isn't in him to do it," scolded Ned. "If I was in your place I'd just cut out and let him find some other fellow to do his slaving. Why, my folks say your father left enough to take care of you in a good way and send you to school and all that. I'd find out my legal rights if I were you, and I'd fetch that old fellow to time." "It would be no use, Ned," declared Dave. "I tried it once. I went over to Brockton, where the lawyer of my father's estate lives, and had a talk with him." "What did he say?" "He said that my father had left no property except the old hotel at Brockton. It is old, for a fact, and needs lots of repairs, and the lawyer says that it takes most of the income and makes the rent amount to almost nothing. I found out, though, that the lawyer is a relative of Mr. Warner, and that Warner gives most of the repairing jobs to other relatives of his. I went and saw the court judge, and he told me that Mr. Warner's report made each year showed up clear and straight." "Judge another relative of old Warner?" insinuated Ned. "I shouldn't wonder." "Neither would I. It's strange to me, though, Dave, that your father ever made such a notorious old skinflint your guardian." "He didn't," asserted Dave. "Who did, then?" "The court, and I had no voice in it. Mr. Warner let me stay at the school I was attending when my father died for about a year. Then he claimed the estate couldn't bear the expense, and he has had me home ever since." "Why don't they sell the old hotel and give you a chance to live like other boys who are heirs?" demanded Ned in his ardent, innocent way. "Mr. Warner says the property can't be sold until I'm of age," explained Dave. "That time I went away and got work in the city, I even sent Mr. Warner half of what I earned. But he sent the sheriff after me, made me come home, and said if I tried it again he would send me to a reformatory until I was 21. "Say, that's terrible!" cried Ned, rousing up his honest wrath. "Oh, say, look there!" "Whoa!" shouted Dave. But there was no need of the mandate. In sudden excitement and surprise he pulled old Dobbin up dead short. Then he followed the direction indicated by the pointing finger of his companion. Both sat staring fixedly over their heads. The air was filled with a faint whizzing sound, and the object that made it came within their view for just a minute. Then it passed swiftly beyond their range of vision, where the high trees lining the road intervened. "An airship! A real airship!" cried Ned with bated breath. "Yes, it must have come from the big aero meet at Fairfield," said Dave. "Is there one there?" "Yes, I read about it in the newspaper." Both Dave and Ned had seen an airship before. Besides two that passed over the town the day previous, they had once witnessed an ascent at the circus at Brockton. Every nerve in Dave's body was thrilling with animation. He had dropped the lines, and Dobbin had wandered off to the side of the road seeking for grass, nearly tipping over the load. Dave righted the wagon. "Say," spoke Ned, "stop at the house, will you?" "What for?" inquired Dave. "I want to ask the folks to let me go to town with you." "I will be glad to have you, Ned." "All right. You know the common is right on the top of the hill, and one of the fellows said that they could watch the airships yesterday for miles and miles." A turn in the highway brought the boys to the Towner place. Ned ran into the house and soon returned all satisfaction and excitement, his pockets filled with cookies and apples. "Mother says I can go with you, Dave," he said. "I can help you unload, and we can drive over to the town common and join the crowds." Dave's head was full of airships, and the incident of the hour made him forget his troubles. He and Ned chatted and lunched animatedly all the way to Brooksville. The business part of the little town was located on a hill, as Ned had said, but they did not go there at once. The warehouse where Dave was to deliver his load of potatoes was near the railroad, and there they drove. They found no one in charge of the office and had to wait till the proprietor arrived, which was nearly an hour later. It was quite 6 o'clock before they got the potatoes unloaded. Then Dave drove up the hill. Quite a crowd was gathered in the public square. The boys hitched old Dobbin near the post office and joined the throng. Everybody was talking airships. It seemed that half a dozen had passed in full sight. 3 of them had sailed directly over the town. One of them had dropped about 100 printed dodgers telling about the aero meet at Fairfield, and Dave was glad to get hold of one of these. The excited throng was in great expectation of the appearance of another airship. It was getting on towards mealtime, and quite a number had left the common when a chorus of sound echoed out. "Ah! There's another one! Hurrah! Look! Look! Ah!" The last utterance expressed disappointment. A swift-sailing aeroplane had come into view, circled, and was lost to sight over the crest of a distant hill. There was a great attraction for the chums in the crowd and bustle about the common. It was quite dusk before they started away. Dave realized that he would have to account for every minute of his time, and expected a scene when he got back home. He had seen so much, however, and heard so much talk on his favorite theme, airships, that a glimmering idea came to him that he was soon to know more of them. Dave kept up his spirits bravely, and he and Ned chatted over dreams and plans to find a chance to get over to Fairfield some day soon and view all the glories of the great aero meet close at hand. It had become quite dark by the time they neared the turn of the road leading to the town or place. Old Dobbin was plodding along the dusty road at his usual leisurely gait when suddenly Ned stretched out his hand and caught the arm of his comrade in a great state of excitement. "Whoa!" he cried. "Do you hear that, Dave?" "Sure enough," responded Dave, checking the horse, and both of them sat rigid on the wagon seat and stared up into the sky. "It's another one of them," said Ned. "Listen!" There was a quick, snappy sound like a sharp popping of an exhaust. There was a flashing streamer of light outlining a dark object that both the entranced lads knew to be a belated airship making its way homeward. At that moment something swished through the air. Dave didn't see it. He rather felt it. Before his senses had fairly taken it in, however, old Dobbin made a jump. 10 feet ahead the slow-going animal plunged as Dave had never seen him do before. Then he made an affrighted veer. Over into the ditch went the crazy old vehicle with a crash. Dave, clinging to the seat, was simply flung sideways, but his companion was lifted bodily. Head over heels, out of the wagon went Ned, landing sprawling in the mud. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. From the Clouds. "What happened?" shouted Ned Towner in dismay and confusion. "Dobbin ran away, that's all," replied Dave quickly. "Why?" asked Ned, righting himself and looking around him in a puzzled way. "Something struck him." Dave made the declaration as he dismounted cautiously from the wagon. Dobbin lay on his side as if perfectly satisfied with a rest in the soft dirt. One wheel of the wagon was splintered to pieces, and the wagon box had caved in on one side. "Hold his head till I slip the traces," ordered Dave. They got Dobbin to his feet and managed to pull the wagon up the slight slant. "Whew!" whistled Ned. "Here's a pretty bad wreck." "Yes," answered Dave soberly. "I don't know what Mr. Warner will say about it." "Let him say," flared out Ned. "The old thing was ready for the junk pile long ago." "That won't help much," said Dave. As he spoke, Dave went over to a stretch of broken fence and dragged a long rail up to the wagon. This he strapped to the hub of the broken wheel. "I guess the wagon will drag home," he observed, as he hitched up Dobbin anew. "But we will have to walk." "Say," broke in Ned suddenly, "you think something hit the horse and started him up?" "I'm sure of that," declared Dave. Well, then I'll bet it's one of those Bulgers. See, we're right at the end of their lot. You know they pelted you once before." "I know that," admitted Dave, "but I don't see or hear anything of them just now." "Oh, they'd lay in ambush in that brush yonder all night to play a trick on either of us," insisted Ned. The Bulgers were a family crowd, very numerous and troublesome. They had often pestered Dave in the past, and aroused by the suggestion of his comrade, Dave walked back the road a dozen feet or so, peering sharply into the straggly brush lining it. "What is it, Dave?" inquired Ned as his friend uttered a quick cry. He noticed that Dave had come to a short stop and was stooping over in the road. "My foot kicked something," explained Dave, groping about. "Why, I wonder what this is." "What?" put in Ned curiously. "It's a bundle of some kind." "Why, yes," added Ned, peering sharply at the object in Dave's hand. "It looks like a rolled-up sweater." "Someone must have dropped it from a wagon," said Dave. "There's something else here than a sweater, though." "Well, let's have a look at it," suggested Ned eagerly. "Hold on," said Dave as his comrade reached out to unroll the wadded-up bundle. "It's too dark to make out anything plain." The moon had not yet come up, and on that tree-lined road it was pretty dark. Dave moved up to the wagon. Under the front seat was an old lantern, and he secured this and lighted it. "Why, I should say there's something else besides a sweater!" exclaimed Ned excitedly, as Dave unrolled the garment on the seat cushion. "Yes, there's a pocketbook," said Dave. "Open it. Let's see what's in it," suggested Ned. "A watch," spoke Dave. "And some money. Why, this is a big find, Dave. Wonder who lost it. And look, there's a medal, a gold medal." Dave took this up and inspected it closely. His fingers trembled with excitement as he did so, for the pretty bauble suggested the theme nearest and dearest to his heart. The main plate of the medal was chased with the outline of an airship. Pendant from this by two tiny gold chains was a little strip of metal, and on this was inscribed the words, "Presented to Robert A. King by the CAA, First Endurance Prize." "Why, I know where this came from," cried Dave suddenly. "Do you?" "Yes." "Where?" "It fell out of the airship that just went over us. It was this bundle that hit the horse and made him run away." Why, stammered Ned in great excitement. "Do you think so?" "I'm sure of it. That name there, too. King. I read about him being down at the meet at Fairfield in the paper yesterday, and CAA means Central Aero Association." "Is there much money, Dave?" questioned Ned. "About $50. "Well, what are you going to do with it?" "Return it to its owner." "Of course, but how are you going to get it to him?" "I'll find a way," replied Dave thoughtfully. "He will be pretty glad to get back that medal." "I should think so, too." Dave carefully replaced the pocketbook in the sweater, rolled it up, and stowed it in the corner of the seat space. Then he took up the lines and started up Dobbin, both he and Ned walking along beside the wagon. Ned had been dazzled with the sight of the valuable contents of the sweater bundle and could talk of nothing else. Dave let him talk and did not say much. He had the broken wagon, and a thought of the way that mishap would stir up his guardian on his mind, and it was not a very pleasant thing to think about. At the same time, Dave had a vague, glimmering idea that events were framing up that brought him in closer touch all the time with aeronautics. "Say, Dave, I'll go home with you if you like," suggested Ned as they neared the Towner place. "Thank you, Ned, but I don't think you had better." "I could help you put up the horse and all that, you know." "No," responded Dave definitely. "There's a storm to face, and I might just as well face it alone and have it over with. Tell me what you decide to do about getting that stuff back to the airship man, won't you?" "I certainly shall." "I wish you could arrange to take it to this Mr. King yourself, Dave," went on Ned. He would be sure to appreciate it and help you get an insight into the doings down at the aero meet in which you are so interested. Well, see you tomorrow. Good night." "Good night, Ned," responded Dave, and started on his lonely way. He wondered how his guardian would take his late coming in the broken wagon. As the rail supporting the broken wheel clattered over the rutty road leading into the yard, Dave drew Dobbin to a halt and stared up wonderingly at the one side window of the barn loft. There Dave saw a light, or rather the receding radiance of a light, as if some person was just descending the stairs with a lantern. It was a very unusual circumstance for anyone to visit the loft except himself. He had always used it as a workroom, the grain and the hay being stored in a shed built onto the stable. The next moment Mr. Warner came out from the barn. He carried a lantern in one hand, and the other was a big sledgehammer. The old man looked ugly, excited, and was out of breath. The moment he caught sight of Dave, he hurried forward, dropping his hammer. "Ha ha! So you've got home at last, have you?" he snarled. "Yes, sir. I'm afraid I'm a little late," said Dave. "A little late? A little late?" snarled the old man. "You're 2 hours behind time. Now then, I want to know what this means." "I was delayed in finding Mr. Swain at the warehouse," explained Dave, "but I don't make that an excuse. There were some airships going over the town. Everybody was looking at them, and I couldn't help doing it myself." "Airships?" shouted Warner. "Well, there's one airship, as you call 'em, that won't fill your head with nonsense any more." "What do you mean?" inquired Dave anxiously. "I mean that I won't stand your loitering and wasting my time any more," declared Dave's guardian. "I mean that I've settled one end of your nonsense. I've smashed that crazy model of yours, and if I hear any more of this airship rot, I'll give you the trouncing of your life." "You've smashed my model?" gasped Dave, in unspeakable amazement and dismay. "Yes, I have. And what about it?" challenged the irate old tyrant. You dared to—" began Dave, his face on fire, and he felt as if he could no longer control himself. Then, fortunately, at just that moment, there was a diversion. His guardian's eyes chanced to fall upon the dismantled wagon with one wheel gone and the box supported by the dragging fence rail. With a shriek of rage that was almost a bellow, he grabbed Dave by the arm and dragged him up to the wrecked vehicle. "Who did that?" he raged. "Don't tell me. It's a piece of spite work. Who did that, I say?" End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3. Breaking Away. Dave Dashaway was almost speechless. His tyrant master had struck him in a tender spot indeed. Not that Dave had ever been foolish enough to build extravagant hopes on his model. It had all been guesswork and an experiment. However, his soul had been wrapped up in his labor. He had been proud and pleased with his progress as an inventor, and that mean, vengeful act of an old man roused him up terribly. "What busted that wagon?" demanded Mr. Warner, grasping Dave's arm till the pain was unbearable. Dave jerked loose, and panting and angry-faced, confronted his guardian with a look that made the old man hesitate. His lip trembled, but he held his speech as steady as he could, and he replied, "Dobbin got scared and ran into a ditch. With your stargazing after those airships, I'll warrant." This was so near the truth that Dave did not reply. "What do you suppose will pay for that damage to that wagon?" demanded Warner. "I suppose my hard work will," bluntly replied Dave. "Your hard work? Bah! It looks as if you was worked hard, fritting half the afternoon away, spending hours and hours on that worthless piece of trumpery up in the barn loft. I've settled for good and all. Now you put up that horse, get your supper, and get to your room. You daren't leave it until I say so. and I'll just call the sheriff up here again and see what he says about affairs." This was an old-time threat of his guardian. It was so worn and so threadbare that Dave did not pay much attention to it. He proceeded silently about his task, unhitched Dobbin, led him to his stall, and made him comfortable for the night with feed and bedding. As Dave came out into the yard again, he made a speedy run for the wagon. His guardian had been poking about the vehicle and had discovered the sweater roll. This he now held, turning it over and over in his hand and viewing it curiously. "Here," shouted Dave, "that's mine." "Oh, is it?" snapped the old man, holding the bundle out of Dave's reach. "Well, what is it?" "I'm going to see." "Well, I don't mean it belongs to me," Dave corrected himself, "but I found it." "Well, what is it?" "It fell out of an airship. It lighted on Dobbin's back, and that's what made him run away." "Fell from an airship?" repeated old Warner with a sniff of disbelief. "Romancing, eh?" "No, I am not. I'm telling you the truth," persisted Dave. Hello here. What's this?" Mr. Warner had opened the sweater. His miserly old eyes fairly gloated over the pocketbook and its contents. His thin, cruel lips moved as if he was smacking them over a meal. "You found this, you say?" he inquired. "Yes, I did," responded Dave brusquely, none too well pleased with the way things had turned out. "Well, finders keepers," chuckled the old man with a cunning laugh. "Nobody is going to have that pocketbook but the owner," said Dave staunchly. "I'll arrange about that, you young insolent," retorted Mr. Warner. "You will have to, in the right way, too," asserted Dave, who was quite nettled. "Eh? What's that?" shouted the old man. "Just what I said. You will look at that medal in that pocketbook, and you will find the owner's name on it. It is Robert King. All you've got to do is send his property back to him. I happen to know that he is at Fairfield now, and a letter directed there would reach him." "Say," blurted out old Warner, "I know what to do, I guess, about my own business." "This is my business, too," insisted Dave. "I found that property, and I'm honest enough to want to get it back to the man who lost it." "You can get into that house as quick as you can and mind your own business and keep your mouth shut, or I'll make it pretty interesting for you," bawled the old man. Dave closed his lips tightly. He had gone through a pretty trying ordeal. It had made him almost desperate. It had come so thick and fast, one indignity after another, that Dave had not found time to break down. His just wrath over the destruction of the model was lessened by the appropriation of the sweater bundle. "There's something I won't stand," declared Dave as he made his way into the house. "I know who that property belongs to, and if Mr. Warner tries any tricks, I'll expose him." Dave felt sure that his tyrant master would not do the square thing. He might not dare to keep the pocketbook and its contents and say nothing about it. Dave felt sure, however, that in any event, Mr. Warner would not give it up without a big reward. This humiliated Dave somehow on account of his father and his own liking for aeronautics. Dave felt more kindly to one of that profession and would have been glad to return the lost pocketbook for nothing. Dave glanced in the kitchen as he passed its open door. The scraps of food on the uncovered deal table did not at all appeal to his appetite. Beside that, he was too stirred up to care to eat. He went up to the little room in the attic and sat down at the open window to think. Dave felt that a crisis in his affairs had been reached. His mind ran back rapidly over his past life. He could find nothing cheering in it since the time he was removed from a pleasant boarding school upon the death of his father. The latter had been traveling in foreign parts at the time, giving lectures on aeronautics, of which science he was an ardent student. Since then, old Silas Warner had led his young ward a very wretched life. Several letters had come addressed to Mr. Dashaway. These Mr. Warner had not shown to Dave, but had told him that they amounted to nothing of importance. Dave noticed that these, with some other papers, his guardian kept in a strong manila envelope in his desk. Dave had known nothing but neglect and hardship with Silas Warner in the past. He saw no prospects now for any betterment of his condition. After what had happened during the day, the man would be more unbearable than ever. "I've got to do it," murmured Dave after a long period of painful thought. "My life will be spoiled if I stay here. I'll never learn anything. I'll never amount to anything. There's only one way out." Dave got up and paced the floor of the darkened room in greatly disturbed spirit. "I'll do it," he added a moment later, with firmness and decision. "I'll be true to my name. It's a Dashaway for freedom. Yes, I've made up my mind. I'm going to run away from home, if this can be called a home." Old Warner had told Dave to go to his room and remain there until further orders. In his present state of mind, however, Dave cared little for that. He was so excited that the air of the close, low-ceilinged roof room seemed stifling to him. The lad got out through the window and clambered down the remains of an old vine trellis without trouble. Too many times at night, when he could not sleep, had he stolen out thus secretly to work on his pet model in the barn loft, to miss his footing now. Dave reached the ground, went over to the pasture lot, and threw himself down upon the grass. His hands under his head, staring up at the stars, he rested and reflected. The more he thought, the more he was resolved to leave Brookville. He would leave it that night, too, he decided. He knew that when his guardian discovered his absence, he would raise a great hue and cry and try to find him, just as he had done before. "I'll move as soon as he goes to bed," planned Dave. "That will give me a safe start away from Brookville." Dave decided to regain his room by the route he had left it. As he again neared the house, however, he noticed a light in the sitting room which his guardian usually occupied evenings. As Dave made out Silas Warner and observed what he was about, he glided to a thick bush near the open window and peered curiously through its branches. Dave saw Mr. Warner seated at the big, cumbrous desk. He had thrown the sweater on the floor at his side. The pocketbook lay open on the desk, and its contents were spread out before their engrossed possessor. The old man was viewing the collection with gloating eyes. He took up the badge and weighted it in his hands as if thinking of it only as to its value as gold. For nearly 10 minutes, Dave watched his miserly guardian finger over the various articles. He knew that it was in his mind to keep them if he could. Finally, old Warner restored all the articles to the pocketbook. He took a small box from a drawer in the desk. Dave had seen it before. As Warner opened it, Dave again caught sight of the manila envelope, which he knew held papers referring to his dead father. The old man locked up the desk and carried the box to a corner of the room. Here he leaned over, and Dave saw him lift up a small section of the floor. When it was set back in place, the box had disappeared. A new train of thought came into Dave's mind as he noticed all this. He now knew the secret hiding place of his miserly old guardian. He watched the latter take up the lighted candle and go over to the wing room of the house where he slept. Mr. Warner reached out of its window and pulled in a rope, resting its end on the floor, directly beside his bed. This rope ran out to an old swing frame which held a bell of pretty good size. It had once belonged to a schoolhouse, but had got cracked, and Warner had got it for nothing. He had never had occasion to ring it. He had told his neighbors that he had put it up for protection. He was a lonely old man, he had said. Someone might try to rob him. If so, he could alarm his neighbors and call them to the rescue. This had given rise to the rumor that the old man must have some hidden wealth about the place. To a stranger, however, the dilapidated old place would not indicate this. Dave waited till his guardian had retired. Then he got back to his room, moving about cautiously. Dave owned only the rather shabby suit he wore, but he had some handkerchiefs and the like, and these he gathered together and made up into a small parcel. Then he sat down to wait. It was in order for Dave to depart by the window route if he so chose, and no one the wiser. Dave, however, had something further to do before he left the inhospitable roof of his guardian. It was not until 2 hours later that Dave ventured to leave his room. He stowed the parcel containing his few small personal effects under his coat and took a piece of unlighted candle in his hand. Then he groped his way cautiously down the rickety stairs. In a few minutes Dave was in the sitting room. He had listened at the entrance to the wing room in which his guardian slept. He had heard Silas Warner breathing regularly and was sure that he was asleep. Dave carefully closed the door of the sitting room opening out into the hallway. He went to the corner of the room where he had seen his guardian stow away the little box. A chair stood over the spot, and this Dave moved out of place. He lit the candle, and by poking with his hand, soon located a loose section of flooring about 2 feet square. "I found it," breathed Dave softly, and he lifted the square from its place. Below showed the usual space found between beams. Lying across the lower boards was the box he was after. Dave lifted it out. He found that it was secured with a small padlock. "I don't like to do it," mused Dave, "but there is no other way." He found little difficulty in wrenching the padlock, hasp and all, out of place, for the fastening was of tin and flimsy. Then Dave opened the cover of the box. He took out the pocketbook belonging to the aeronaut. Then he lifted out the manila envelope. "I don't suppose there's anything but old worthless papers in this envelope," he decided, "but it belongs to me, if anybody." The mischief! Dave sprang to his feet in dismay. He had tilted the square of the flooring against the chair nearby. Some way, accidentally, his hand had struck it, and it tipped over flat with quite a clang. Trying to stop it, Dave fell against the chair. This went over with an echoing crash. Dave knew that the windows were double locked. If he had disturbed old Warner, his only route of escape was through the single doorway of the room and down the hallway. So quickly did he run for the door that he had not time to blow out the candle. Dave opened the door with a violent push. Once out in the hall, he glanced anxiously across it. "Too bad, too late," he murmured as his eye fell upon his guardian just coming out of his room. Against the candlelight, Silas Warner must have recognized Dave. The latter was just stowing the manila envelope in his pocket, and the old man must have seen that too. "Hi there! Stop! What are you up to?" bellowed old Warner. Dave ran down the hall at the top bent of his speed. He knew the kitchen door was bolted, and risked no chance of being stopped by halting to open it. Indeed, he dodged down a step into the storeroom, the window of which was always open. He was through its sash space with a bolt and a squirm in a jiffy. Making sure that he had not lost anything in his flight, Dave put across the yard. The last he saw of his alarmed and excited guardian was his frowzled gray head stuck through the buttery window, bawling frantically, "Stop him! Stop thief! Stop thief!" Dave crossed the yard and the meadow in swift bounds. He was sorry that his intended flight had been discovered, and was satisfied that old Warner would proceed to make a great noise about it very promptly. However, now started on his runaway career, Dave resolved that he would not turn back. "A good swift run, and I'll get safe and sound out of this neighborhood," he told himself. "Of course, Mr. Warner will start a chase after me, but I'll get a lead they can't beat. Hello!" Dave Dashaway prepared for a new spurt of speed as a wild alarm rang out on the still night air. Clang! 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 End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4. Dave Dashaway's Hideout. The old cracked school bell back at the Warner place awoke the echoes far and wide as Dave ran on. As he came to the corner of the road leading past the home of his friend, Ned Towner, he paused for a moment to take breath and estimate the situation back of him. The bell had by this time ceased its loud clangor. Dave saw lights appear beyond the house. He fancied, too, that he heard voices in the distance. It was not yet very late, and he guessed that if only out of curiosity, some of the neighbors would appear upon the scene. "There's somebody coming from the other direction." He spoke quickly, jumped the ditch, and plunged in among the clump of underbrush just in time to avoid 3 running forms hurrying down the road. "It's the Bolger boys," said Dave, peering forth from his covert. "Hustle, fellows," the oldest of the trio was urging. "Yes, there's some kind of a rumpus up at the Warner place," added a second voice. "Hope it's a fire," piped in a third, reckless voice. "That would make a regular celebration after the airships." Dave, from what he overheard, judged that the Bolgers were on their way from the village when attracted by the commotion at the Warner farm. Others might soon appear, Dave mused, and struck out across a meadow. He knew that it would be risky to go into the village or nearer to it. In a very short time, thought Dave, his guardian would have the sheriff and his assistants looking for him. The lad thought rapidly. He planned that if he could reach the switching yards of the railroad, he might get aboard some freight car and ride safely out of the district. He ran along a wide ditch which lined the Bolger farm, intending to leap it at a narrow part and cut thence across a patch of lowland to the railroad tracks. "Oh, oh!" suddenly ejaculated Dave, and fell flat, the breath nearly knocked out of his body. He squirmed about, wincing with a severe pain in one ankle, and wondering what had tripped and still held him as a prisoner. "It's a trap," said Dave, as he got to a sitting position and investigated. "It's a muskrat trap set by those Bolger boys, I guess." The blunt edges of the trap, which was secured by a chain to a stake driven in the ground, did not hurt him particularly. It was the severe wrench, the sudden stopping, that had caused the trouble. Dave pried the trap loose and got to his feet. "Hello, this is serious," he spoke as he found that he could not progress without limping, and then only very slowly. Dave looked about him with some concern. The commotion in the direction of the Warner place was increasing. He fancied he heard the hoofs of a horse coming down the road. "It won't do to linger here," he said. "They would be sure to find me. I don't even believe I can get to the railroad with this foot. I have certainly sprained my ankle." Dave had done nothing of the kind, but he did not know it at the moment. The moon was shining full and high. He looked about him for some hiding place. He limped along the edge of the ditch, despairing of being able to cross it. Suddenly, a suggestive idea came to him as he made out the home of his friend Ned. "If I can manage to get to the barn on the Towner place, I know where to hide safe enough," he mused. His foot hurt him dreadfully, but he kept on, got past the rails of the pasture enclosure, and came up to the barn at the end away from the house and the road. The loft door was open, and cleats ran up on the outside boards. Dave sunk down all in a heap in among the fresh, sweet-smelling hay. The pain left him as soon as his weight was removed from his foot, but he was quite exhausted from the efforts he had made. The boy rubbed his foot ruefully and listened to distant sounds floating on the night air. Finally, he crept over to the corner of the barn farthest away from the opening leading to the lower floor. There was no danger of anyone coming to that spot. There was a broad crack in the boards there, and Dave could look out towards the road. Dave caught sight of a horseman dashing along the highway in the direction of the village. Then he made out the 3 Bolger boys returning to their home. A little later 2 men appeared. One of them was leading a horse. "It's Mr. Warner and our nearest neighbor, and they've got Dobbin with them," said Dave. He saw his guardian go to the front of the Towner home. A light appeared inside, and in a few minutes Mr. Towner came around the corner of the house with Mr. Warner. The horse was led up to the barn. "Well, I'm sorry Dave has run away, Mr. Warner," Mr. Towner remarked. "Oh, we'll catch him," replied Dave's guardian. "A bad boy, sir, a very bad boy." "Why, I never thought that." "But he is. He broke into my desk and has stolen money and other property of mine." The listening Dave fired up at this bold and false accusation. He was half-minded to go down into the yard and face his accuser with the proof of the falsity of his charge. "If you'll just let me take any old rig to hitch up Dobbin to, it'll be an accommodation," went on Warner. "That runaway rascal maliciously smashed the wheel of my only wagon this evening." Mr. Towner pulled a light vehicle out of the shed, and Dobbin was hitched up. Silas Warner and his neighbor drove off, and Mr. Towner went back to bed. Dave was worried and disturbed for a long time, even after things had quieted down. In his present crippled condition, he did not dare venture outside. He was snug and safe for the time being, at least, and finally he dropped off into a sound sleep. The youth awoke to find the sun shining through the half-open hay door. He crept over to it as he fancied he heard someone moving about in the yard below. Dave was gratified to find his foot in much improved condition over the night previous. It was still a bit lame and stiff, but he could bear his weight upon it without flinching. "Glad the ankle isn't sprained or broken," he told himself cheerfully. "I believe I could walk with it, and maybe try a run if I had to." He was much refreshed by his deep sleep, but both thirsty and hungry. His face brightened up considerably as he heard someone clucking in the chicken yard, and glancing down, recognized Ned Towner. Dave did not know who might be in the stable below or in the vicinity. He leaned towards the loft door and gave a low but distinct whistle. It was one he and his chum used often in signaling one another. "Hello!" Ned Towner dropped the pan out of which he was throwing corn to the chickens. He looked about him in a startled way. Then he came out of the poultry yard, trying to locate the source of the call. "It's Dave," the lurker in the hayloft heard him mutter. "No one else? Dave!" "Shh!" Dave had shown his face and waved his hand from the door aperture. "Dave!" repeated Ned, in still further wonderment. "Yes, it's me," responded Dave in a hurried, cautious tone of voice. "Anybody else about?" "Not a soul." "All at breakfast?" "Yes." "Come up here, will you?" "You bet I will, and mighty glad to see you," cried Ned, with vim and sincerity. "Now then, what?" Reaching the loft, Ned challenged his friend, curious and excited, as if he expected that Dave would have a great story to tell. "You know what has happened," said Dave. "That you ran away last night. Yes, they are talking about nothing else in the house yonder. Say, tell me all about it, for I know old Warner's tale is all bosh." "The robbery end of it is, you can rely on that," replied Dave, and he recited briefly his adventures and misadventures since they had last met. "Say," cried Ned, when Dave had concluded his story, "you just stick to your plan." "I intend to," answered Dave sturdily. "If ever you get back, or they get you back, life will just be unbearable for you. Old Warner has branded you as a thief, and he's mean enough to keep the advantage. Tell me, how can I help you?" "Well, of course I'm pretty hungry," said Dave with a laugh. "I'll fix that end of it," promised Ned. "Just wait till father and the hired men get off to work in the field, and I'll see that you get a first-class breakfast." Ned had to leave his friend just then, for someone was calling him from the house. A few minutes later Dave saw Mr. Towner and his hired men come to the stable, hitch up two teams, and drive over beyond the trees lining the yard. In half an hour Ned came up through the inside of the barn. He produced a package done up in paper, and then took 2 bottles from his pockets. "Hot coffee, cold water, biscuits, some bacon, gingerbread, and 2 hard-boiled eggs," he reported. "Why, this is just famous," declared Dave with zest. "Here's a book, too. Say, it will just suit your fancy," added Ned, bringing the volume out from under his coat. "It's a great story. I got it down at the library yesterday. I thought of you when I picked it out." "What's it called?" inquired Dave, his mouth full of good food. "Modern Wonders of the Air. Up to date, too. It tells all about balloons and early airships. Too scientific for me, but I bet it will be easy as ABC to you." "I don't know about that," said Dave, "but it will be right welcome. I'm thinking I had better keep hidden away for today, anyhow." "I should say you had," assented Ned forcibly. "Why, but I haven't had a chance to tell you until now." "About what?" "Two of our hired men saw the sheriff and old Warner early this morning." "Are they still looking for me?" "The officers and your guardian were out till daylight, scurrying around the country in every direction. The sheriff's men have driven to 3 or 4 neighboring towns. They are watching the railroad depot, and there isn't a soul in town who isn't on the lookout for you." "I suppose that Mr. Warner has made me out to be a regular boy villain," suggested Dave, looking serious. "He has, but your friends know better, and soon as you are away safe and sure, I'll just make it my special business to face old Warner down with the real facts. You're not thinking of leaving this hideout in the daytime, Dave?" "I dare not take the risk of being seen now." "Then make yourself comfortable till I come home from school at noon," said Ned. Dave felt immensely better after his breakfast. He had a true friend to aid him and keep him posted, a safe hideout, and an interesting book to read. Dave stole down to the lower floor of the barn after a spell and took a dip in the water trough. Then he resumed his comfortable couch on the sweet-smelling hay, and for 2 hours was engrossed in reading. With what he knew and what he desired, and the way circumstances seemed to be leading him, Dave felt that he was destined to soon know a good deal more than he did about air sailing. He got to planning his course of flight when he started out again. Then he fell to dreaming, went to sleep, and had the delicious sensation of being aboard a real airship, himself a full-fledged aviator. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Making Off. "Now is your chance, Dave." "Yes, the coast looks clear." "How's your foot?" "That horse liniment from the stable has fixed it up all right. I think I could run as good as ever." "Which is mighty good. Only don't run into any of the sheriff's friends." "I'll try not to," laughed Dave. He was taking a farewell of his trusty and helpful friend Ned. Dave had never known a truer one. He had kept under cover in the hayloft all that day. At noontime Ned had brought him a lunch and news. There was not much to report. Mr. Warner had told the officers that his truant ward would make for some crazy airship place first thing. The sheriff, however, refused to go outside the county unless he was paid for it. Old Warner was too stingy to advance any money, so it looked as though, once beyond the boundaries of the immediate district, Dave would be pretty safe from pursuit. It was almost dusk now, and the two friends stood behind the barn shaking hands good-bye. Dave had eaten a good supper, and besides that, Ned had brought a little parcel containing sandwiches to spell him, as he put it, if he got hungry on the all-night tramp he was starting out on. "I hate to see you start out this way without a cent of money," said Ned rather anxiously. "I haven't got any, and you wouldn't let me tell Mother anything about your being here. I know she would help you if she could." "Thank you, Ned," replied Dave gratefully. "Your mother, too. You see, though, I have plenty of money." And with a smile Dave slapped his coat where the pocketbook that had dropped from the airship the evening previous reposed. "Yes, but that isn't yours, Dave." "I shall never forget that," replied Dave promptly. "There's just this, though. If I got into a tight place, I wouldn't hesitate to borrow $1 or 2 to help me on my way back to the owner." "You're going to look for Mr. King right off, are you, Dave?" "Yes, The Birdman first and foremost, Ned. I'm counting a good deal on interesting him in giving me advice or help about getting into this airship business." "Oh, you'll land there," predicted Ned confidently. "You're too much in earnest not to succeed." "Then you're going to head for Fairfield?" "Yes, Ned." "That's where the aero meet is?" "Exactly." "Aren't you afraid from what he guesses and knows that old Warner will be looking for you, or have someone looking for you right at that place?" inquired Ned. "I shall guard out for that," replied Dave. "I've thought and planned it all out." "How is that?" "Tomorrow is the last day of the meet at Fairfield, so of course after that Mr. King won't be there. I suppose he follows the circuit, as they call it. So you see, I won't be long at Fairfield under any circumstances, and I don't think my guardian will risk the money chasing me all around the circle." "That's so. I guess you figured it out about right, Dave." "Well, good luck, old fellow, and be sure to write to me." "I will, Ned." "Coast all clear?" Ned glanced around the corner of the barn towards the house. "It's all right, Dave. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Ned stood watching his friend until he was sure he had got well across the pasture lot and safely out of view from the house or the road. This stretch of the Towner place was very poor land, finally running into a swamp. The moon was just coming up, but on the lowlands the rising mist was a protection to Dave. He got to the end of the Bolger farm and then lined the drainage ditch extending beyond it. Dave leaped it finally at a narrow place, avoiding a wide morass. A little beyond this, the lad came to a rutty road. It ran a mile or so towards the railroad, but as he knew was not much used, except to drive cattle to be shipped to the stock pens at the freight yards. Dave had his plans clearly worked out. His present proposed destination was Fairfield. He was in hopes of finding some freight train making up in the yards. His idea was to get into some open or empty car and secure a free ride most or all of the way to the city where the aero meet was in progress. "There's someone coming," exclaimed Dave. He had not counted upon meeting anyone upon that lonely road at that time of night. With the words, he sprang behind a big tree. Then he peered clearly ahead of him, intending to make for the fence and hide himself in the thick underbrush beyond it. The air was clearer and the moonlight brighter on the higher land that Dave had now gained. Perhaps a quarter of a mile down the road he made out a horse. Chasing it was a man. The animal would browse and wait till its evident pursuer got up close to it. Then, with a snort, kicking up its heels madly, it described a series of playful circles, dodged the man, and leaped the fence at the side of the road, a yard-high wire. Dave watched the man chase it all over a patch of scrubby brush. Finally, the animal jumped the fence back into the road. It kept sideways towards its pursuer, nibbling at the grass. It waited till the man was fairly upon it. Then up went its heels, and along the road the animal sped, the man shouting vainly after it. This time the horse took a longer spurt than before. Dave made out the situation and debated with himself how he had better act. He could not afford to come up against any person who knew him. In the distance he could not make out the identity of the man. About the horse, however, Dave was sure. The animal Dave had certainly never seen before. No such horse was known about Brookville, and spontaneously Dave uttered the exclamation, "What a beauty!" Dave was a lover of animals, and this one carried him to the bounds of admiration. High breeding, grace, elegance, and value showed in the splendid animal. As it pranced up the road in the white moonlight, Dave was reminded of the pictures he had seen of some magnificent charger. "He looks like a racehorse," said Dave. "He has run away from that man who is desperate to catch him. I ought to help him do it. If I can, I might tie the horse to a sapling and get out of sight before the man comes up." Dave kept behind the tree. his plan being to dash out when the horse ran by and attempt to catch the halter rope which was trailing on the ground. As the animal got within 10 feet of the tree, however, it let down its speed to a slow walk, and, its pursuer fully a quarter of a mile away, proceeded calmly to nibble at the grass. Dave kept perfectly still. The animal, all unsuspicious of his being so near, came closer and closer to the tree in its browsing. A toss of its head sent the trailing halter rope whipping the ground not 6 inches from Dave's foot. "Got you!" cried Dave in triumph, as he grabbed the rope with one hand, and with the other clung to a knob on the tree to resist the quick jerk the horse gave. "So, nice fellow, so!" Dave talked soothingly to the animal, that, however, with flashing eyes and bristling mane, backed foot by foot, resenting capture. Dave got a hand-over-hand clutch on the rope, and finally a firm grip on the halter bridle itself. He was surer of himself now, for he knew considerable about horses. Still, he counted on something of a tussle. To his surprise, however, as he gently stroked the mane of the high-mettled steed, the animal moved towards him and nosed down to his side, sniffing inquiringly. "Why," said Dave with an amused laugh, "the animal scents the lunch Ned gave me." Dave did not know what was contained in the package in his pocket, but he proceeded to break through its paper covering. His fingers closed on a sugar-frosted cookie. As he brought it into sight, the horse gave an eager whinny and fairly snatched it from his hand. Then it rubbed its nose caressingly and coaxingly against his shoulder. "Good friends, eh? As long as the cookies last," laughed Dave. "All right, here's another." Dave now had the animal under perfect control. Of a sudden, however, the horse picked up his ears, glinted his eyes backwards, and began to paw the ground. Dave saw the apparent owner of the horse approaching. "I'll stand my ground. The man is a stranger," thought Dave rapidly. The man was puffing, panting, and perspiring. He looked exhausted after his vigorous chase, but glad as he saw that Dave had the horse firm and tight. "Capital!" he cried. "I wouldn't have lost that horse for a fortune, and it means nearly that to get him safe back where he came from. Good for you, young fellow," he added. "I'll make it a lucky catch for you." "A good beginning to my runaway career," said Dave to himself. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Cadmus. "Look out!" shouted Dave suddenly. In his eagerness to recover his horse, the man who had just come up to the scene of the capture ran directly up to the animal, to promptly retreat in some dismay. Without trying to break away from Dave, the horse began to move rapidly in a half circle, using tail, rear hoofs, and body as a menace against the approach of its master. Dave gave the animal another cookie, which quieted it down. However, the horse kept a constant eye on the man, who did not venture to approach any nearer. "Well, well, well," laughed the man in a comical way. "This is a new stunt for Cadmus. Why, I thought we were friends, old fellow," he added, addressing the horse. "Did he run away from you?" inquired Dave. "The first chance he got, and the only one so far." "How is that?" asked Dave curiously. "He was raised as a pet. Anybody can see that. Never heard of Cadmus?" "Well, not until you called him that," replied Dave. "Well, Cadmus is a famous racer." "He looks it." "Oh, he's made his name. Isn't that so, Beauty?" "Take care," again warned Dave. Cadmus is still a little nervous. In fact, the horse had resented any nearer approach of its master. Dave almost fancied that the intelligent animal pressed up close to himself as if asking protection. Thinks he's going to get a whip for breaking the rules, said the man. I'll discipline on feed, but I never strike one of my horses. I say, youngster, you've done me an immense favor. Will you carry it a little further? I'll try, replied Dave willingly. If he was going my way, and the speaker nudged his shoulder down the road in the direction from which he had just come. Oh, any way suits me, responded Dave quickly. Then I wish you would lead the horse till we get to the car. Cadmus seems to have taken a fancy to you. He belongs in a car? Asked Dave, a little vaguely. Why, yes, replied the man with a stare at Dave, as if he was supposed to know that. We're taking Cadmus to Brompton. They switched us in the yards, and someone left the car door open, and Cadmus made his break. Oh, I understand now, said Dave quickly. And then an eager thought came into his mind as he wondered if this lucky incident might lead to his finding a way out of Brookville unnoticed. The last cookie in Dave's hand kept Cadmus quiet and friendly until they reached the railroad yards. The man piloted the way among the network of tracks and finally along a string of freight cars standing behind a planked roadway. Here we are, he reported. Dave noticed that the man had halted beside a light-colored car bearing the words, Palace Horse Car. A small colored boy dressed in a horse jockey's jacket and a big husky fellow who looked like the hostler were tilting a slanting platform up to the big door at one end of the car. It took some persuasion to get Cadmus to go up to this cleated platform, but it was finally accomplished. Dave looked around the car with some admiration. It deserves its name, Palace, doesn't it? He asked the owner of the horse, who seemed greatly relieved to find the animal housed once more safe and sound. You ought to see the accommodation we have in a trip across the continent, returned the horseman. This is nothing to it. This is pretty fine to my way of thinking, declared Dave. Fully one-half of the car was given up to Cadmus. The box stall at one end was padded and cushioned to guard him against jarring. The feed box was of porcelain, and the light blanket they put on Cadmus was as fine as a silk bedquilt. Come in, youngster, invited the horseman when he had seen that Cadmus was attended to properly. He led Dave into a partitioned-off apartment, comfortable as a boudoir in the Pullman sleeper. There was a couch, a table, and plush-covered easy-chairs. Into one of these chairs Dave sank. I calculated I'd have some trouble getting that horse if you hadn't come along, asserted the man. Oh, when Cadmus got through playing, he would have been docile enough, suggested Dave. And made me miss my railroad connections in a big race tomorrow, added the horseman. See here. And he glanced into a pocketbook he had taken out, and then drew a long, slim book and fountain pen from another pocket. What's your name? Why, hesitated Dave, what do you want to know for? I want to give you a check. What for? To fix you out for your trouble. I wouldn't know where to cash it, declared Dave. Besides, if you want to fix me out, as you call it, there's another way that would please me better. Well, just name it, youngster. This car goes to Brompton, you told me, I think. Yes, we start in about an hour. Well, sir, observed Dave, if you give me a free ride as far as that, I will consider that you have paid me 100 times over for the little I have done for you. Little you have done for me, cried the horseman. I suppose you don't consider that Cadmus is just about worth his weight in gold to me. Now, see here. And the man took the pocketbook out again and drew forth 2 bills. There's all the currency I've got with me, 2 5s. You'll take them. No, sir, said Dave. You'll take them, I said, repeated the man in a forceful way. And you'll give me your name and address, and promise that if ever you need a friend, you'll send word to Amos Baker. Here's my card. Money and card were thrust on Dave in spite of himself. My name is Dave Dashaway, he said, but I have no address, and I don't know how soon I may have. Oh, is that so? Observed the horseman, eyeing his companion curiously. Yes, sir. The truth is, I'm leaving home in a hurry, but that cannot interest you." "Yes, it will," echoed the horseman. "Tell me about it, lad. Maybe I can give you some advice that will help you out." Dave told his story, and his auditor listened to it with great attention. "I like your pluck, and your plan to get to Fairfield is all right," said the horseman. "We'll be at Brompton in 3 hours. You've now got money enough to carry you to Fairfield and a good deal farther. Your going to Brompton is carrying you directly out of your route. You can ride as far as that, though, get off there, and take the first train for Fairfield. See?" "I shall never forget all your kindness, Mr. Baker," said Dave gratefully. Just as the locomotive hitched on to the train of which the stock car was a part, Mr. Baker called in the colored boy. He gave him some orders, and in a few minutes quite a repast was spread out on the table from several hampers in the car. The train reached Brompton after midnight. Mr. Baker shook hands heartily with Dave. "I reckon nobody will be hanging about looking for you at this time of night," he observed. "Good luck to you, youngster. If you have any further trouble with that pesky guardian of yours, drop me a line, and I'll appear on the scene. Write occasionally, anyhow. I'll be glad to hear how you're getting along. If some mean people don't interfere, it will be in a good way, for you're the right kind of boy to make a success, Dave Dashaway, and Amos Baker says it." The freight train had stopped at a crossing, and as it moved on, Dave had to walk down the tracks nearly 1/2 a mile to reach the railroad depot. Dave trudged on hopefully to meet his first experience in a big city. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 7. Robbed. "Well, that's the hardest part of it over and done with," declared Dave as he walked into the railroad depot at Brompton. The youth felt pretty much encouraged. His foot had mended, he had earned $10, and had won a good friend. He had got safely away from Brookville by a route his pursuers would never suspect him of taking. "More than all, best of all," spoke Dave with longing and satisfaction, "I'm well started for Fairfield and the airships." Dave found the depot almost deserted. A few travelers were nodding on the benches in the passenger room, waiting for a late local train going north. The ticket office was closed, but the depot policeman was on duty. Dave approached this official. "What about a train for Fairfield?" he spoke. "Last one gone 2 hours ago." "When is the next train?" 8:15 a.m. Dave was disappointed. That was nearly 1/3 of a day ahead. It would be a long wait, but he decided to make the best of it. He selected a snug seat in a dark corner and began to nod before he was aware of it. "Here, rout out," sounded a gruff voice in his ear, and he was shaken rudely. "Oh, yes, I was asleep," mumbled Dave, recognizing the depot policeman. "Going to close up now. No more trains either way tonight," he said. "But I'm waiting for the Fairfield train." "Can't do it here. Against the rules. Come back in the morning." "Where can I go?" "Why, to a hotel, of course. There's lots of them within a stone's throw." Dave got to his feet and out of the depot. He had unexpectedly received a great deal more money than it would take him to get to Fairfield. He treasured his little hoard, though. The idea of saving the price of a night's lodgings had pleased him. "What do I care for a bed?" he told himself as he came out of the depot into the starry night. "I can sleep anywhere." And Dave made for the deep entrance to a store and sat down upon its step. Almost instantly, however, a policeman in uniform stepped out of the deep window of a neighboring doorway on the lookout for stragglers. "You'll have to move on, sonny," he said. "All right," assented Dave with a comical smile. "I wouldn't hurt one of those iron steps, though." Dave walked on till he came to a big building. It bore the sign Empire Hotel. Glancing in the lobby with its elegant appointments, Dave shrugged his shoulders and walked on. Now, that's too rich for my blood, even if I do feel like a millionaire, he smiled. Something more modest for me. Finally, Dave reached a respectable-appearing hotel that looked second-class and cheap. He entered the lobby and went up to the clerk's desk. "How much do you charge for a night's lodging?" he asked. 50 cents. "I guess I'll stay then." "Got any baggage?" "No, sir." "Any references?" "I should say not," Dave told himself. And he walked away when the clerk had explained that they never took any transients without baggage or an introduction from a responsible party. Dave sauntered about leisurely now. He made up his mind to walk about all night. At the end of an hour, however, the unfamiliar stone pavements began to remind him of his weak ankle. He noticed an illuminated sign running out from a shabby-looking building. It read, "Rooms, 25 and 50 cents. Well, that sounds all right, reflected Dave, and he ascended a stairway lighted up by a smoking oil lamp at its top. A drowsy, sleepy-eyed young man was lounging in a broken chair behind a desk. At its side were a lot of pigeonholes and some holding keys. "I want to stay here all night," stated Dave. "No one's hindering you, is there?" observed the young man. "What price?" 25 cents. The young man ran his eye over a portion of the pigeonholes and announced, "Single rooms at that price all gone. The best room is 50 cents. You've got it?" "That's too much." "Better go to Tom's lodging house," sneered the fellow. "You'll find a fine 10-cent crowd there if that's your style. Tell you, if you don't mind sharing a room with a boy like yourself, I can accommodate you. 2 beds? Yes. I'll take it. Pay it." Dave drew out his money. The young man grumbled about having to change a $5 bill, but that was soon got through with. Then he handed Dave a key with an iron strip on it that prevented lodgers from putting it in their pockets and forgetting to return it. "Room 58, 4th floor," advised the young man, lounging back into his chair again. "Be sure to put out your light when you go to bed." Dave climbed up 2 more flights of rickety stairs. The air of the place was close. One floor was divided up into as many as 100 little bunks, and the snoring was disturbing. "I wish I hadn't come here," thought Dave, but he kept on to the 4th floor, made out 58 on a door, and unlocked it, and entered a room with 1 window. The light in the hall showed a lamp on the table. There were 2 narrow beds in the room, and they did not look particularly uncomfortable. When he lighted the lamp, Dave glanced over at the cot that was occupied. Near it was a chair, and over this hung some shabby garments. Dave had a plain view of the sleeping inmate of the bed, and he did not like the face at all. It had a red scar on one cheek, the hair was straggling and untidy, and, taken all together, the boy made Dave think of a crowd of young roughs who had run up against him and tried to provoke him into a quarrel in his early midnight wanderings. Dave opened the window of his room to let in fresh air, then he undressed. He drew a chair up against his bed and folded his clothes across it. Then he blew out the light. "Feels good to stretch out human-like once more, sure enough," said Dave contentedly. Then he groped about on the chair until he found his coat and drew out the pocketbook belonging to Robert King, aviator. "I want to make sure of that," he mused. "My own money, too. I'll quietly put it all in the pocketbook and slip it under my pillow. Then no one can play any tricks on me without waking me up." Dave worked in the dark. He fished out the bills from his pocket, and then he got hold of the silver change he had received downstairs. It was composed mainly of dimes and nickels. Just as he was striving noiselessly to transfer the handful to the pocketbook, bang, rattle, trap, went 6 rolling nickels out of his hand. "Hello, what's that?" challenged a sharp, suspicious voice. and Dave knew that the noise made by the falling coins had awakened the sleeper in the other bed. Dave was bound to answer. He slipped the pocketbook under his pillow and held tightly the coins remaining in his hand to prevent them from jingling together. "It's me," he replied. "Who's me?" "A roomer just in." "You're a boy, aren't you?" "Like yourself." "What's your name?" "I did not register," replied Dave evasively. "Huh! Don't want to be sociable, eh? Well, shut up, then." With a grunt, the occupant of the other cot seemed to flounce over and resume his slumbers. Dave did not like the sound of his voice any better than he had the look of his face. He hoped the fellow had not heard the coins drop on the floor. Dave reached out cautiously, groped about, managed to locate several nickels, placed these noiselessly in the pocketbook, and was glad that things had quieted down. Somehow he felt disturbed and uneasy. He knew that the place was second class and probably housed a good many rough characters. He made up his mind that he would keep awake until daylight and then go back to the railroad depot. He heard 2 and then 3 o'clock strike from some neighboring bell tower. By 4 o'clock he was fast asleep. In a dreamy sort of a daze, his next waking action was lying with his eyes closed and counting 7 strokes of a bell. "Oh, dear, this won't do at all," cried Dave, leaping from the bed to the floor. "Why, I'll miss the train to Fairfield if I don't move sharp. Hello, hello!" Dave came to a standstill, poised like a statue. He stared at the chair by the side of his bed. His clothes were gone. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. In their stead, lying scattered carelessly on the floor, were the clothes belonging to his boy roommate. In a second, a dreadful flash of dismay and fear came to Dave's mind. He sprang at the bed he had just left and lifted the pillow quickly. "Gone! All gone!" he gasped, turning cold all over. "I've been robbed." End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. A Startling Surprise. Dave ran to the door, his heart sinking and alive with the keenest excitement. Arrived there, he checked himself. He realized that he could not rush out in the shape he was in. "I can't do it," he cried resentfully as his eyes fell upon the clothes left in the place of his own. "Oh, this is terrible." A little faint and a good deal dismayed, the youth sat down on the edge of his bed to get a better grasp of the situation. He saw now that he was probably too late to overtake the thief. His eyes fell upon 2 nickels lying on the floor near the cot. These had been a sort of a guide to the robber, who must have heard them jangle to the floor when Dave accidentally dropped them. "That fellow must be a real bad one," mused Dave. "He probably pretended to sleep all the time and was watching me. Anyhow, he has managed to get hold of everything I had. The worst of it is the watch and the money and the medal belonging to Mr. King are gone too. The thief may have been gone from here for hours for all I know. I'm in a bad fix." Dave felt very rueful. He had not come up against much of the wickedness of the world before this. He blamed himself for not guarding his possessions more carefully, for coming to the lodging house at all. "There's nothing for it but to put on these clothes," he decided at last with a sigh. "I don't suppose it will do any good to tell the lodging-house keeper about the thief, and in a big, strange city there is little chance of my running him down." The clothes of the boy who had robbed Dave nearly fitted him. Dave's own attire had been threadbare in spots, but it had been clean. Somehow Dave could not repress a feeling of repugnance as he put on the clothes. The shoes pinched, being short and narrow, but he managed to get them on. Dave went down the stairs and into the office on the second floor of the building. A lot of loungers were sitting around on benches, and a new clerk was behind the desk. "Is the young man here who was on duty last night?" inquired Dave, returning the room key. "I just relieved him," was the reply. "He's gone home to sleep." "He gave me room 58, went on Dave. "There was a boy in one of the beds. These clothes are his." "Hey?" ejaculated the man with a stare. "Yes, sir. He's taken mine. I shouldn't think you would allow such characters in here." The man shrugged his shoulders indifferently. He pointed to a sign behind the desk. It informed roomers that the house was not responsible for thefts. "If you had anything valuable in your clothes," advised the man, "you should have left it in our safe." The speaker pointed to a box with a padlock behind him. Dave decided that he could place little reliance on either the man or his strong box. "I did lose something valuable," he cried, smarting under his loss. "Did, eh?" "Yes, $50 in money, besides other valuables." "That's so?" smiled the man incredulously. "Know the thief?" "I do. Don't I tell you that he slept in the same room with me?" "Know him again?" "I'm sure I would." "Can you describe him?" "Yes, he had a scar on one cheek." "I better put the police on his track, then." "Thank you, I'll do just that," replied Dave with energy, starting briskly for the door under the impetus of the suggestion. Dave hurried from the building and down the street. At a crossing he found an officer in uniform. This man directed him to the nearest station. Dave framed in his mind the most accurate description he could give of the thief. "It hadn't ought to be very hard to trace down a fellow with a scarred face like that," meditated Dave. "Hello, I never thought of it before." With the words "police station" staring at him in the face from the front of the grim-looking brick building, Dave came to a dead halt with a shock. It had just occurred to him that he might invite considerable risk by visiting the police. They would want to know how he came by the pocketbook of Robert King. He would have to tell them the circumstances and his name. They might have received some word already from Brookville to look out for him. They might get into inquiring into his story and detain him as a runaway. "No, it won't do at all," declared the boy emphatically. He got away from the place as fast as he could, all stirred up as he found time to realize that he was still near enough to Brookville to be seen and recognized by someone who might inform on him. Dave went back to the railway depot and consulted some maps and timetables. He found that Fairfield was not on the direct line and that the indirect route covered about 60 miles. If he could go back past Brookville in the other direction, it would be 10 miles less. Across country on foot, as nearly as he could make it out, on airline route it was not over 35 miles. "Why, I could walk it in a day," thought Dave, "and I'll do it." He had just 10 cents in his pocket, the 2 nickels the thief had disdained to pick up. He had made up his mind that it would be a waste of time to try and hunt up the boy who had robbed him. In the first place, Dave was unfamiliar with the city. The thief had probably got away from it with his booty as fast as he could. Dave walked across the city. Near its limits he went into a bakery and invested the 10 cents in crackers and buns. The shoes he wore began to hurt his feet. After a brief lunch, he struck off on a smooth country road. "It is my duty to reach Fairfield and find this Mr. King," he decided. "I suppose he values that medal very highly. He is in better shape than I am to start a search for the thief or the plunder." A little after noon, Dave sat down by a little stream and took off his shoes. They had hurt him terribly the last mile he had traveled. He found his feet blistered and swollen, bathed them in cool water, and when he resumed his tramp, walked barefooted, carrying his shoes strung over his shoulder. Shortly afterwards, Dave reached a little village. As he passed the cobbler shop, he went in and asked the man in charge if he would exchange his shoes for anything he could wear. The shoemaker went over a lot of stock uncalled for, but there was nothing among them that would fit Dave. Finally, he made a bargain to take 25 cents for his shoes and resumed his journey. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Dave met with a new adventure. It had more influence on his future career than he dreamed of at the time. He had followed a path leading along a ravine. Its edges were heavily wooded, and at the bottom a pretty babbling brook coursed its way. Dave was glad to get once more where things were green. He lay down on the grass, fell asleep, and awoke from his nap with the echoes of a series of sharp reports ringing in his ears. "Hello! Someone shooting!" exclaimed Dave. Oh, the mischief! He had traced the sounds as coming from the valley and had crept to the edge of the ravine and leaned far over in an effort to peer past the thick foliage. The crumbling edge gave way under the weight of his body, and Dave took a tumble. He grabbed out at some bushes, but they gave way, only briefly slowing his progress. Then, as he whirled along, he was conscious that he was rolling directly towards a towering bronzed figure standing like a statue on a ledge of rock. The form was that of an Indian, remarkable and startling in this unexpected place. He stood posed magnificently, an uplifted tomahawk in his hand, and not 10 feet distant, on another ledge of rock, was a man dressed in a hunter's costume. This latter person had a rifle in his hand, and was sighting along its barrel, and on the other side of the ravine, seated under a tree conversing with a young lady, was another man. In the flashing sight he had of all of this, it looked to Dave as though the hunter was going to shoot the man with the lady unless the Indian hurled his tomahawk in time to prevent him. Straight up against the Indian Dave rolled. Quickly, the latter put out his foot. He brought it squarely down on Dave's chest and held him motionless. "Lie still," he spoke rapidly, "or you'll spoil the picture." End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. Making His Way. Dave felt as if he was in some unreal, topsy-turvy dream. Everything was like a Wild West picture, and he closed his eyes, wondering if his fall and roll down the side of the ravine had not sent his wits astray. The fling of the tomahawk he saw was real, so was the sharp report of the gun. Above all, the heavy foot pressing down on his body and holding him motionless was tangible. Dave opened his eyes as the foot was suddenly removed to view an amazing spectacle. The Indian had taken out a pipe and was leisurely filling it. The hunter had picked up the tomahawk, which had struck a piece of rock and split open, showing that it was made out of papier-mâché. Across the ravine the young man had risen to his feet and was yawning and stretching, and the young lady walked away, putting up her parasol. "Mind yourself now," spoke the owner of the foot that held Dave a prisoner, and he reached down, grasped the boy by the arm, and set him on his feet. "I say," gasped Dave vaguely, "what is this?" "Moving picture," replied the man briefly. "Yes, it moved quick enough," said Dave slowly. "Oh, I see now," he added, as, a step advanced, he came in view of several persons near 2 automobiles down the valley, and in their midst a camera. It was all plain to Dave in a moment. The persons he saw were acting out a motion picture. He had heard of these groups before. In the present instance, they had selected a pretty natural spot as a framework for their acting. Dave had stumbled upon them at a moment when a particularly thrilling drama was in progress. "Come on with us," spoke the man who had played the Indian, looking Dave over curiously. "We're going to have lunch, and if you'll carry my traps down to the camp, you shall have a snack." "Thank you," replied Dave, greatly interested in the group, and nothing loth to accepting the invitation. The man had motioned to a spot under a near tree where a satchel lay. It was opened, and he closed it, but not before Dave saw that it was filled with his acting wardrobe. Dave followed after the two men. They soon reached the first automobile. Here a man, apparently the chauffeur and general utility man, was placing food on a piece of canvas spread on the ground as a tablecloth. Nobody paid any attention to Dave, who sat down the satchel as directed. The chauffeur had a large, well-filled hamper beside a tree stump which served for a table. Dave went up to him. "Can't I help you, mister?" he asked pleasantly. "Why, yes, you can," was the prompt response. "It's pretty rushing around here when the people get hungry." Dave, under direction, set 7 wooden plates and as many paper napkins on the impromptu table. He sliced up 2 long loaves of bread, carried the cold meat and fruit to the table, and went to a spring nearby to fill a big tin pail with cool, sparkling water. A young man wearing glasses, and smart-looking and brisk, seemed to be the manager. He beckoned Dave and the chauffeur to join the family party. Dave enjoyed the liberal meal immensely. He was interested and entertained with the continuous chatter of the group about him. "What's the program, Mr. Alden?" asked the big fellow who had acted the Indian. The man addressed took a roll of manuscript out of his pocket. He separated the sheets and passed one around to each of the party. "There's your parts," he said. "Scenario: The Ruined Mill." "I don't see any mill," observed the man who had played the hunter, looking up and down the ravine. "2 miles farther on, according to my directions," explained the leader of the party, consulting his notebook. Dave was so interested that he planned that he would linger with the group until he had seen how they had made a moving picture film. When one of the crowd, whom they called Davis, moved away from the table and went to the intricate outfit near the wagon, Dave unobtrusively followed him. He was engrossed in watching the process of loading up the film reels when the manager came up. "See here, Davis," he said in his jerky, energetic way, "we'll have to get busy if we expect to cover this program in daylight." "I told you that myself," was the retort. "I've waited 2 hours for Banks now." "He got delayed somehow." "The only bother is the rescue of the heroine in the mill race." "Cut that act out, then." "Why, it's the thriller of the scene. No, I can't do that. None of the fellows can swim, though, and I don't see what we're going to do." Dave fancied he understood the situation. In an eager way he pressed forward. "Mr. Alden," he said, "can't I be of some help to you?" "Hey, what?" exclaimed the man, looking Dave over. "A boy? But then, look here, can you swim?" "Like a fish." "Then you'll do. Why, this is big luck. Hi, Dollinger, start up the machines. It's wasting time waiting for Banks any longer." Dave got into the smaller automobile after the traps lying about had been packed into it. The others boarded the larger and more elegant machine. They went a roundabout way to strike a traversed road, and in about an hour came to the stream again. It was where the old abandoned mill stood. Mr. Alden gave Dave one of the acts of the scenario, as he called it. He explained to Dave what he was to do. "Put on this suit," directed the manager, selecting some clothing from a big box. "Better wear a wig and whiskers so you'll look more like a man. These moccasins will fit your feet. Now, you understand, when the villain pushes the heroine into the mill stream, you are to act your part. Just follow the cues in your typewritten screed there." "All right," reported Dave promptly. "I think I know what you wish me to do." It was like watching a play, the various scenes that were enacted inside and outside the old mill, all forming part of a very interesting story. As it neared its end, Dave took a fishing rod as directed and seated himself on the bank of the stream a few yards from the mill. At the sound of a whistle, he glanced at the mill, arose, dropping his fishing pole, tore off his coat, and took a plunge into the water, throwing his arms up in the air and floating down the swiftly rolling stream. The heroine came floating into view. She splashed around and seemed about to sink as Dave reached her. He caught her, swam for the shore, and both went off to change their dripping attire. "You did that very well," said Mr. Alden in a kindly tone, coming up to Dave some minutes later. "You can keep those moccasins if you like," he went on, "and here's your pay for helping us." The speaker handed Dave a dollar bill. There had been considerable of a fascination to the little business part Dave had played, and he would not have been sorry if Mr. Alden had offered him continued employment. The latter forgot him in a moment, however, bustling about and directing the others, who piled into the big automobile. "You had better wait here about an hour, Dollinger," he spoke to the man who attended to the rough work of the party. "All right, sir. Banks may come along, and if he does, fetch him on to Fairfield." "What's that?" said Dave with sharp interest to Dollinger. "Is the party going to Fairfield?" "Yes, that's the next on the route, I understand," answered Dollinger. "Say," broke in Dave eagerly, "I don't suppose you could crowd me into your machine and take me that far?" "Oh, why not?" quizzed Dollinger good-naturedly. "I'll help you double work if you could," persisted Dave. "That's where you're headed for, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." "Well, you're welcome to a seat in the machine. I like your company," observed Dollinger cheeringly. Both of them hustled about getting the traps of the party stowed into the most convenient compass. After that, Dollinger waited an additional hour for the man Mr. Alden expected. "I reckon we filled orders," said Dollinger finally. "It looks like rain, and if we expect to reach Fairfield before dark, we had better make a move." A storm overtook them 10 miles on their way. They were, however, then on a good road and found shelter in a wayside shed. There was still further delay when the auto broke down in a deep rut. Dollinger had to send Dave on to the near village to bring a repairman to the scene. It was about dusk when they started again. While the man was making repairs, Dollinger and Dave ate their supper. "They're the lights of Fairfield, I guess," spoke Dollinger as they drove down a well-ballasted road. "Mr. Alden and his people have gone to a hotel, and I will have to call on him for directions as to where I am to put up. I generally rough it in this fine weather." The rain had ceased, but a fierce wind was blowing. The sky was overcast, and altogether it was a disagreeable evening. Dollinger located the hotel where Mr. Alden was stopping. He went in and shortly came out with a card in his hand. "All right," he reported, "I know where to go to." Dave's plans were half formed in his mind. He was delighted to realize that he had reached Fairfield so readily that, too, he congratulated himself with comfortable footwear and over $1 in his pocket. Of course his first thought was of Mr. King, the airman. Dave reflected, though, that a dark night in a strange town was not a condition favoring a search for a stranger. He was pretty well tired out, and he kept with Dollinger, hoping something might turn up that would give him a free bed for the night. Dollinger ran the automobile quite out of the city. Finally, he lined the fence of some kind of an enclosure. Dave noticed that it was of considerable extent, but in the dark he could not make out exactly what it was. They at length reached a wide gateway. Outside of it was a small building resembling a switchman's shanty. There was a light inside of it and an old man moving about. Dollinger stopped the automobile, leaped out, and knocked at the door of the building. He showed the card to the man inside, who read it, seemed to give some directions to Dollinger, and then came out and unlocked the gate. He locked it shut again when the automobile had entered the enclosure. Dollinger drove across an open space, reversed, and backed into one of a series of low sheds with the front open and exposed to wind and weather. "Now then," he said to Dave, "we're housed for the night. Want to stay with me?" "It will save me the price of a lodging somewhere else," explained Dave. "You've earned a sure one here," declared Dollinger. "Nothing like the pure open air for health. I'll rig you up a shakedown that will please you, I'll guarantee." Dollinger was as good as his word. He spread blankets over the roomy seats of the automobile, and Dave voted he had never welcomed a more pleasant resting place. Dave slept like a top. It was broad daylight when he awoke. For a moment he forgot where he was. Just as he arose, Dave gave a jump, a gasp, and a cry. Gazing out through the open front of the shed, Dave saw a dazzling object cavorting swiftly above the ground. "An airship!" shouted Dave Dashaway in a transport of delight. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. At the Hangars. "Hello there! What struck you?" cried Dollinger. The chauffeur and general utility man of the moving picture combination dropped a big spoon with which he was stirring something in a pan outside of the shed. Nearby was a tripod with an oil lamp burning under it. Dave understood that Dollinger was preparing breakfast. Dave did not reply. He could not at just that moment. It seemed to him as though at the touch of a magician's wand his whole life had been changed, as if the most ardent desires of his heart had been granted. The day previous, if some genie had promised to gratify one special wish, Dave would have asked to be put among just such airships and in the company of just such airmen. Now, all that he desired was before him. Circling majestically aloft was a big biplane. Way over at the end of the enclosure was an elevated apparatus from which an airship of another type was evidently making a trial ascent. The machine rose only a few yards, described a half circle, and had to be hoisted up again and again. Between it and the sheds were several small buildings, and at least two of these held some kind of aircraft. The one in flight finally enchained the entire attention of Dave. He watched it till it had made a score of dizzying maneuvers and returned to the ground at the far end of the enclosure, as graceful as a bird and as easy as if landing on springs. "Sets you dreaming, doesn't it?" demanded Dollinger with a grin, slapping Dave on the shoulder to wake him up. "Oh, it's just glorious!" cried Dave, with sparkling eyes. "Mr. Dollinger, what place is this?" "Why, the Aero Park, of course." "You don't mean where they have had the big meet?" inquired Dave breathlessly. "That's it." "Oh, my! And I've got in, too!" cried Dave in a dazzled sort of way. "Why, yes," replied Dollinger, "though that don't count for much just now. You see, nothing's going on." "Nothing going on?" cried Dave, gazing at the airship aloft and then across the broad field beyond him. "I mean as a show. The meet closed yesterday." "But all those airships?" "Most of them will move over to Dayton, where they have another meet next week." "I hope Mr. King has not got away yet," Dave said to himself. "Come on, get a hot cup of coffee and some warmed-up pork and beans in you, and you can go back to your wonder-staring if you like," said Dollinger. He had arranged a fine breakfast from his stores. Dave felt a sense of gratitude and satisfaction as he realized his novel and pleasant situation. "Everything is turning out just as I hoped it would," he reflected. "If only I hadn't lost that pocketbook, and if Mr. Warner doesn't get track of me." Dave insisted on helping Dollinger clean up and pack away the things used for breakfast. "Are you going to stay here for a while, Mr. Dollinger?" he asked. "Oh, yes, all day, I understand," replied Dollinger. "I don't know the exact orders until Mr. Alden comes along. He told me, though, yesterday, that we wouldn't make any further move till tomorrow. Why do you ask, lad?" "Well, I wanted to look about a bit." "Go straight ahead," directed Dollinger heartily. "Say," he added with a droll grin, "thinking of sticking to us?" "Who wouldn't?" cried Dave. "The way you treat folks." "Well, you're mighty welcome company," declared Dollinger in a friendly way. "Willing and useful, too. I shouldn't wonder if Mr. Alden could find a place for you with the party." Dave did not commit himself by making a direct reply. His heart was set on airships, and he ardently hoped that there would be some chance for him in that field. "If I fail, I can fall back on the moving picture crowd," he mused. "I really like the business." Dave left the automobile with the zest and eagerness of a boy starting out to see a big show for the first time. He headed for the far corner of the grounds, where animated scenes were in progress. Just then, however, a broad, low-wheeled wagon, to which 2 horses were attached, came along. It was seemingly conveying a large-size monoplane out of the ground for repairs. Dave noticed that the machine was somewhat battered up. He had never been so near to an airship before, and he followed the wagon in a sort of fascinated way. Once he reached out his hand and touched the wing of the machine. It positively made his fingertips thrill. When it reached the big gates of the enclosure, the same old man who admitted the automobile the evening previous opened them for the wagon and the airship to pass out. There were several people bustling around the little building near the gate, which was the office of the grounds. One brisk individual seemed to be the manager. Dave, standing around, full of everything that was going on, noticed that this man was arranging affairs for the departing airman. A lank, poorly dressed boy stopped the man as he was called to the office. "Say, mister, can you tell me where I'll find this man?" The boy held out a crumpled, soiled card, at which the manager glanced quickly and then brushed by, saying, "Mr. King? You'll find him down at the Hangars." "What's them, now?" stared the boy. "Do you know?" he inquired, turning quickly upon Dave, who stood at his elbow. "I declare I don't," replied Dave with a laugh. "I've seen the word in print, and I know it refers to some part of the grounds here, but I don't exactly understand it." "Well, I've got to find out. I've got to see this Mr. King." "Is he the airship man?" asked Dave. "That's him. Say, where are the Hangars?" persisted the lad, addressing the old gatekeeper. "Why, down there, of course," was the reply, and the speaker pointed to the buildings at the other end of the field where the airships were housed. "I'll go with you down that way," said Dave, "if you don't mind." "Of course not," replied his companion. Dave wondered what the awkward, countrified youth was doing on this aviation field, and what business he could have with Mr. King. He decided that this was his chance to meet the man whom he had traveled so far to see. Dave's companion did not explain his mission. He acted and walked like a fagged-out person who had not had much sleep or a great deal to eat for some time. He was dusty and travel-worn, and made Dave think of a raw country bumpkin starting out in life to find some work other than that of the farm. He had an innocent, credulous face, but showed a certain doughty spirit, as if he was very much in earnest as to what he was about, and intended to stick to it. There was a good deal stirring around the Hangars. Everything was airships and airmen. Over beyond the Hangars, some of the machines were in action. Dave's companion kept on asking about Mr. King, and at length his search was rewarded. He came finally to a portable tarred canvas house. One end of it held a monoplane, which both boys regarded with interest through the half-open door. Near an open door at the other end of the building, An old man was pottering around with a pail and a brush. Dave's companion ran up to him. "Say, mister," he bolted out in his usual unceremonious way, "I want to see Mr. King." "Oh, do you, eh?" retorted the crabbed old fellow. "Well, you sit down on that bench yonder and wait your turn, will you?" Dave and his companion did as the man directed. The boy looked sharply at Dave. "Say," he observed, "you're going to stay here and wait, too?" Dave nodded in assent. The boy looked anxious. "Got business with Mr. King?" he inquired. "Why, yes," replied Dave. "He's lost something, and I want to tell him about it." "Oh, that's it," spoke the boy with a great sigh of relief. "I was afraid you was after a job. If you was, I got here first." "Oh, you can see Mr. King first," said Dave. "Someone is with him now." The walls of the frail canvas structure were thin. Sounds readily penetrated to the outside air. Two persons seemed to be in the room beyond the open door. One of them was speaking now. These words fell upon the hearing of the two listeners. "You'd better give Jerry another chance, Mr. King." "Another chance!" shouted a deep, angry voice. "If your boy ever comes around here again, I'll horsewhip him within an inch of his life, Mr. Dawson, and I want you to make yourself scarce, too." End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11. The Air King. "You'll be awful sorry for this," Dave and his companion heard next. "That's enough, Dawson. My boy Jerry known this business, and you won't find a lot who do." "I tell you that will do," was the forceful response, "and it ends it. Your son gave away a lot of information to a competitor. There are things missing, too. Don't you call Jerry a thief. If he isn't that, at least he neglected to watch my property and my interests as he was paid to do. You'll suffer for sending my son away with a bad character. Don't let me see him again. That's all." "Huh!" The last speaker, a big, fierce-looking man, came out through the doorway with the word. From the way he was dressed, Dave decided that he was employed somewhere about the grounds. His face was red and his fists clenched. He gritted his teeth viciously as he went on his way. "It's my turn now," spoke up Dave's companion eagerly. He made a quick bolt through the doorway. Dave was left alone. His eyes followed the man whom he had heard called Dawson. The latter had gone about 100 feet down the hangar row when a boy about the age and size of Dave came suddenly into view from behind a shed, where evidently he had been waiting. Dave decided that this must be the son of Dawson, concerning whom there had been such an animated discussion. He could surmise from their looks and gestures that the father was reporting the results of the interview to his son. The latter scowled forcibly. Then he shook his fist in the direction of the hangar. "Why," said Dave thoughtfully, "there must be a vacancy here. Maybe I have arrived just in the nick of time." It was easy to figure out that the boy, Jerry Dawson, had been discharged from the employ of Mr. King. His father had interceded for him, but it had been to no avail. Suddenly, Dave's interest was distracted from the incident of the moment. He heard his late companion speaking beyond the doorway. "Yes, sir. A man gave me that card and said he had heard that you was in need of a boy." Yes," Dave heard Mr. King reply. "That is true, but what's your name?" "Hiram Dobbs." "Where do you come from, Hiram?" "I did live 20 miles west of here, but I got tired of farming, and my brother said I could try something else if I wanted to. I worked for a fellow in the merry-go-round business in the city till night before last. He sloped without paying me." "And you want to break into the aero business, eh?" "Well, I heard there might be a chance with you, so I came here. You see, I've had some experience." "In the airship line?" "Well, no, balloons." "How? Where?" asked Mr. King. "Down at Talcott, the town near our farm. There was a circus and a balloon ascension. I got caught up in a rope and was dragged 30 feet up into the air." "Indeed." "Yes, here's a slip from the Talcott Herald telling all about the daring feat of our young townsman. If I hadn't caught in a tree, I'd have gone further." There was a sound of rustling paper. Then Dave heard Mr. King laugh. It was a kindly, good-natured laugh, though. Dave voted he would like the man in whom he was so interested, and yet whom he had never seen. "Well, well," spoke Mr. King, "you are quite a hero. Being pulled up into the clouds on a balloon anchor is not the kind of experience that counts for much in the airship line, though, my lad. If I had something just suited to you, I would give you a chance on your honest face. Frankly, though, I do not think you would be of much use to me until you have some practical experience." "Sorry," replied Hiram Dobbs in a subdued tone, "for I like you, mister. Now, where can I get that experience?" "Well, by working around the hangars and doing odd jobs till you know a monoplane from a biplane and a pylon from an aileron. See here, you go down to the office of the grounds. You know where that is?" "Yes, sir. Near the big gateway, isn't it?" "That's right. You ask for Mr. Linden, and you tell him that I want him to give you a job. Tell him I will be down to see him in about an hour or so." "Will he put me at something?" "I think he will. He has the concessions at all the meets for food supplies and the like. That will bring you in touch with every angle of the aeroplane business, and you look like a boy who would learn." "Just try me and see," chuckled Hiram. "Thank you, sir. I'll get directly about this business." "Wait a minute. Got any money?" "No, sir, I haven't." "Well, there's $1." "But I'm not begging, sir," dissented Hiram. "If I get work—" "Well, you can hand it back pay day." Hiram came out with dancing eyes. He jumped in the air, cracking his heels together. Then, out of sheer jubilation, he slapped Dave on the shoulder. "I've got a job!" he cried. "Well, I'm very glad you have," responded Dave heartily. Hiram did not wait for any further talk. He started off on a mad dash for the other end of the grounds. A man was coming around the corner of the little building, and Hiram very nearly ran into him. Dave had got up from the bench to venture upon seeing Mr. King when the newcomer preceded him through the doorway. Dave considered that he was entitled to the next interview with the airman. The latest arrival, however, was so forcible and precipitate that Dave patiently resigned his chance. The newcomer was very much excited. He was an old man, smart-looking, but very fat and fussy. Dave heard him break out in a stirring voice with the words, "It's come, Mr. King." "Oh, you mean—" "Ah, yes," replied the airman. "Your parachute suit?" "Yes, a perfect full-sized one. See here, you know what I want. You said you were very much interested in my patent." "Well, that's the truth, Mr. Dixon." "And that you would give it a trial." "I will later. See here, my friend, I am engaged all day today." "Why, the meet is over." "Yes, but I have a contract for a private exhibition. There's good money in it, and I can't disappoint my people." "How's the next day?" "I've got to go to the Dayton grounds to get ready for the opening day at the meet. Tell you, Mr. Dixon, bring your device up to Dayton, and I'll see what I can do for you. I am anxious to make a practical test right away." "Well, there are lots of fellows here who will help you out." "Yes, and make a blunder and queer my whole business. No, sir. The man who won the endurance prize is the man for me, and your recommendation would be worth more to me than that of any 10 men in the aviation line." "Why don't you make the trial yourself, Mr. Dixon?" inquired the airman. "Oh, yes," laughed the old inventor. "I'd be a fine performer with my clumsy bungling in an airship, and my 200 pounds, wouldn't I?" "That's so. You'd better pick out a lightweight for the first trial." "Where will I find one?" spoke Mr. Dixon in a musing tone. "You see, I don't expect a long drop on this first test. You know, Boisson never ran his biplane without wearing his padded helmet. All that can do, though, is to break the shock of the fall. My parachute isn't on the pad order at all, nor to prevent a fall." "Well, what does it do, then?" asked Mr. King. "It reduces the rate of the drop and lands the wearer safe and sound. The suit is a loose flowing garment fitted to a framework carried on the back. The lower ends are secured to the ankles. When the aviator throws out his arms, the garment spreads out like an umbrella. I am satisfied that if you once see my parachute dress work, you will give a good word for it that will make it a success." "Well, Mr. Dixon," replied the airman, "if you are anxious to have a trial on the field here, I'll find someone to give it a show under my direction. I hardly know where I will get my man, but I can probably pick him up somewhere about the field. It's a risky experiment, though." Dave Dashaway arose from the bench. Afterward he wondered at his audacity, but just at that moment he could not resist the quick impulse that seized him. He stepped through the doorway, and turning past the half partition, faced the two men whose overheard conversation had so interested him. "Mr. King," he said, taking off his cap and his heart beating rapidly at his own temerity, "I would like to try that experiment." End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 12. A New Friend. "Why, who are you?" exclaimed Mr. King. Dave stood somewhat awed at being in the presence of the famous aeronaut for the first time. He was embarrassed at his own boldness. Yet he managed to blurt out, "I have been trying to get to you for 2 days." Mr. King stared at Dave in a wondering way. He looked him over from head to foot. Dave was not disappointed in the impression made upon him by the aviator. Mr. King was a man with a keen, clean-cut face and well-knit frame. There was a look of decision and business in his clear eye. As he smiled, there was also a genial, indulgent expression to his lips that won Dave. "Oh, I think I understand," spoke Mr. King slowly. "I suppose you are another applicant for a job. Heard I'd fired my assistant and all that. I didn't think that the news had traveled so fast and far." "Why, no, sir," replied Dave quickly. "I knew nothing about what you speak of until a few minutes ago." "Then I have been seeking you to find out if you lost some property out of an airship near Brookville, about 60 miles from here, 3 nights ago." "What's that?" cried the airman, starting up into an attitude of attention and surprise. "There was a sweater," continued Dave, "and a pocketbook with $50 in it, and a watch and a medal." "What about it? What about it?" demanded Mr. King quite excitedly. "The medal, I mean. The rest of the stuff doesn't matter." "Did you lose what I said, sir?" asked Dave. "Yes, yes." "Near Brookville?" "I sailed over Brookville the night you tell about," replied the airman. "I missed the sweater that I had rolled my valuables in just as I got back here. Of course I didn't know exactly where I lost it." "Well," said Dave, "I found it." "Good." "I started to bring it to you, for I saw your name on the medal and heard all about you." Then you've got the medal, have you? Asked Mr. King eagerly and expectantly, staring up from his chair. I'm sorry to say I haven't, Mr. King, replied Dave regretfully. I started for here to return the property to you and lost it. Lost it? That is, I was robbed. By whom? A boy in a lodging house where I stayed night before last. But you know the thief? Only by description, replied Dave. Why didn't you inform the police? Dave paled slightly and then flushed up. The airman was eyeing him keenly. The old inventor looked suspicious, too. Mr. King, at length spoke Dave, I'm a runaway from home. Commented Mr. Dixon dryly. I had to run away from home, continued Dave desperately. It's a long story. There's a heap to tell, but I'm afraid it wouldn't interest you, sir. When I found myself robbed, I thought the best thing to do was to come and tell you all I could. I'm awfully sorry I was so careless. See here, interrupted Mr. King in a generous way, placing a reassuring hand on Dave's shoulder. Don't say that again. You've done all you could, and I thank you for it. Mr. Dixon, he went on, glancing at his watch, I am going to have a mighty busy morning, and I want you to excuse me for a while. All right, nodded the inventor, though rather glumly, arising to his feet. I'll be around the field all day, and I'll be glad to see you and to talk to you about trying your invention any time after noon. Oh, that's good, bowed Mr. Dixon, brightening up. Then he fixed his eye on Dave and said, I believe this young man made some remark about helping us out when he first appeared on the scene. Say, you're a regular old ogre, Dixon, railed the airman. You look as hungry as one wanting to make this lad your first victim. I shan't recommend anybody, nor furnish anybody, to try your parachute dress until I am perfectly satisfied he won't come to any harm. When you do, Mr. King, broke in Dave, I'd like the chance to show my confidence in you by trying the umbrella suit. All right. I'll see you after dinner, said the old inventor, leaving the room. Now then, my lad, spoke the aviator briskly. Sit down. I want to talk to you. Yes, sir, replied Dave gladly. I want you to tell me your whole story. I have an idea it's going to interest me. First, your name? It's Dave Dashaway. Dashaway? Repeated Mr. King with a slight start and a look in his eyes as though he was searching his memory. Yes, sir, my father was a professional balloonist. Maybe you've heard of him. Heard of him? Cried the aviator with a new interest. I should say I have, and read of him. Why, he was a pioneer in advanced aeronautics, and you are his son? Yes, sir. Tell me all about it. Dave looked into the kindly, sympathetic eyes of his new acquaintance, feeling sure that he had found a true friend. He told the story of his life simply. As he tried to make it brief, his auditor more than once checked him, as if every detail interested him. You are a brave and deserving young fellow, Dashaway, said the airman heartily. I have you to thank for putting me on the track of that lost medal, which I value beyond price. Do you think there is any chance of your getting it back? Inquired Dave anxiously. I am sure of it. I want you to come with me down to the field office. In the meantime, think up the closest description possible of the fellow who stole it. Here, added the airman, pointing to a little writing table, just sit down there and jot it down as clear and brief as you can. Dave did as directed, while Mr. King explained, The thief won't value the medal. He will probably sell that and the watch for what they are worth as gold. I intend to telegraph to the police at Brompton to keep an eye out for the thief and to offer a reward for the medal. Mr. King bustled about the room and put on another coat and took out some papers from a satchel and acted as if about to start out on business. "Why, I was just going to the hotel to see you," he said suddenly, as a newcomer appeared on the scene. "Ready for business?" "Oh, yes," was the prompt reply, and the latest visitor stepped into the room where Dave sat. "Why, hello! Friend of yours, Mr. King? What, do you know young Dashaway?" "Very pleasantly, too," answered Mr. Alden, the manager of the moving picture outfit, for Dave recognized him at once as that person. "He helped us out of a tight box yesterday." "You didn't tell me about that, Dashaway," remarked the aviator. "There was so much else to tell," explained Dave. "Well," proceeded the motion picture man, "I've been thinking of you, my lad. How would you like to work for me? Right along." "What's that?" broke in Mr. King, in his quick, jerky way. "No, you can't have him." "Eh?" questioned Alden with a stare. "Why not?" "Because I'm thinking of hiring him myself," replied the aviator. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13. A Start in Business. Dave Dashaway trembled with excitement and pleasure. He was proud and glad the way things had turned out. The aviator noticed the happy look on his face and nodded encouragingly. "All right," spoke Mr. Alden. "I see you've got first show. The trouble is, our man we depended upon, a fellow named Banks, failed us yesterday, and I guess he won't show up in time for the Airship pictures. He's the only one in our crowd who will do what we call the desperate stunts." "What do you call those?" inquired the airman. "Oh, Banks is a regular acrobat. He's the man who falls downstairs and gets knocked around in funny pictures, and jumps from the seaside cliffs, or is blown up by dynamite in the tragic ones." "I see. Now, like yesterday, the hero had to rescue the drowning heroine in the roaring mill-stream. Our young friend here happened along in the nick of time and did the stunt nobly. None of the rest of the crowd could even swim. This young fellow can, like a fish." "And now you expect him to fly?" "Hardly that," was the laughing rejoinder. "But in your exhibition we want to bring in the little incidents to make an interesting story, you know. And Getaway here—" "You mean Dashaway?" "Yes, he would work in famously." "Well, we will see about it," said Mr. King. "How would you want to begin the pictures?" "The outfit will be here inside of an hour." "I will be on hand," promised the aviator. "Come with me, Dashaway. I want to get that telegram to the city." Dave felt as if he was treading on air. It was, in fact, a supreme moment of his young life. He did not feel that he had done any grand things, but telling the truth and doing his level best had put him in line with very promising prospects. Mr. King hurried along with his brisk, bustling way, absorbed in the business on his mind. When they reached the office of the grounds, he beckoned Dave to follow him into the little compartment that answered for a telegraph office. "Give me the description you wrote out," he said. "Good for you, Dashaway," he added with satisfaction, as he ran his eyes over the words Dave had written. "You cover it well. With that telltale scar on his face, I think the young rascal who robbed you will be easy to find. All I care for, though, is the medal. He will probably sell that in the watch to some pawnbroker, and a liberal reward will lead the police to find them for me." "My losing those things is going to cost you a lot of money, Mr. King," said Dave regretfully. "And suppose that sweater of mine had been found by some dishonest person, or trampled down out of sight in the mud? No, no, Dashaway. I count it a big thing. You have given me my first hope of recovering the medal." Mr. King wrote out a lengthy telegram, ordered it sent, left some instructions with the operator, and went outside again. Here he was immediately surrounded by half a dozen persons. Among them were newspaper reporters seeking information as to the aviator's plans for the next coming aero meet at Dayton. Professional airmen wanted to discuss the program ahead. Some agents with airship supplies took up some of his time. It was half an hour before Mr. King got rid of his company. Then he came up to Dave, his watch in his hand. "See here, Dashaway," he spoke. "I want to ask you a question." "Yes, sir," replied Dave attentively. "Do you want to work for me?" "Do I?" faltered Dave. It's been my dream ever since I heard of you." "Good enough. You're engaged. Go down to the hangars and wait till I come." "Hold on," halting Dave as he started to obey orders. "I want to say a word. I call it all opportunity, the queer way you have run to my affairs. I like your make-up. The last assistant I had played me mean. He'll lose by it. I'm willing to do a good deal for a fellow who will be loyal to his business. I put big faith in you. Don't disappoint me." "Say," began Dave with a great gulp, and he could not bring the words out. He was so worked up. "I know what you would say," spoke the airman quickly. "Never feel any different about it than you do at this moment, and there will be no regrets." "There's only one thing that troubles me, Mr. King," observed Dave. "What's that?" "My guardian. I ran away from home." "Good for you. From what you tell me, that miserly old rascal Warner won't waste any time or money hunting you up. If he does, I think I know how to handle him." Dave started down the field so filled up with joy that he could have shouted out aloud. Up to this time his mind had been so occupied with affairs outside of airships that he had found no opportunity to view those he had seen in detail. Now he seemed to be a part of the great unique activity surrounding him on every side. "It's wonderful. It's grand," he mused. "Oh, to think of my luck and the friends I've met with." Dave's eyes filled with grateful tears. He felt as if suddenly he had found his right place in life and a real home. The thought that he was to see, survey, and perhaps handle a real airship thrilled him with gladness. It will be like getting into some palace of wonders, he reflected, and the grand chance to learn from the star man of them all, Mr. King. Dave hurried by many a group surrounding airplane models that would have halted him usually. He was anxious to get to the hangars. He had not yet examined the crack monoplane belonging to his employer. He knew its name, the Aegis, and had got a mere glimpse at its outlines. Now he was free to look it all over. "Hold on there." To make a short cut to the hangars, Dave had passed between a part of the grandstand and a building where refreshments had been sold during full attendance at the meet. There were not many people around just there, and the short cut took Dave into a still more lonely place. Someone had come up behind him, butted into him forcibly, and sent him up against a wooden platform. "I want to speak to you," sounded a voice, strange to Dave. "You've got a nice way of introducing yourself," began Dave, turning around with some asperity. "Hello, I know you." "Do? Then there's no need of any explanations," jeered his assailant. Dave recognized the latter instantly. It was Jerry Dawson, the boy whose father had visited Mr. King less than 2 hours previously. Dave had seen this youth only once before. It had been at a distance, too. He knew that sullen, scowling face, however, at once. The boy was taller and older than Dave. He was stockily built and strong. He stood with his fists raised, blocking Dave against the platform. "What do you want?" demanded the latter. "I want to ask you a question." "Ask away." "Have you gone to work for Mr. King?" "What if I have?" "Then you've landed in the wrong box, I can tell you that. I'll stand no fellow cutting in on my rights." "What do you call your rights?" inquired Dave calmly. "I've worked for King ever since the season began. I've slaved for him and helped him get the endurance prize." "Indeed," remarked Dave, trying to suppress a smile. "Now he's in a muff. He knows he can't get along without me, but he's stubborn, and so am I. You leave him alone, and don't cut in on my job, or I'll make it warm for you." "What do you expect I'm going to do?" inquired Dave. "Has King hired you?" "Yes." "And are you going to start in with him?" "I am." "After what I tell you?" "Yes, that won't make any difference," said Dave. "Then I'm going to whip you." "All right." "You won't take a warning." "Not from you." "Look out!" Dave determined to defend himself. He was no match for the big overgrown bully, but he was cornered, and it was not in his nature to show the white feather on any occasion. "You're bigger than I," said Dave, backing up to a firmer footing, "but I won't let you or anyone else browbeat me without a cause." "And I'm bigger than either of you," roared an intruding voice. "You young bully, make yourself scarce, or I'll pick you up by the nape of your neck and drop you into that mud puddle over yonder." End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Dave Dashaway, The Young Aviator, by Roy Rockwood. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14. His First Airship Ride. Dave recognized the newcomer on the scene as Hiram Dobbs, his companion during his first visit to the hangars. The latter had appeared like magic through a near-open doorway of the temporary restaurant building. Hiram had said he was bigger than Jerry Dawson. He now proved that he was also stronger. He grasped the surprised bully by the arm, gave him a swing, and sent him slamming up against the side of the nearest building. "Get out of here," he ordered, "or I'll run you out." The discomfited bully scowled frightfully at Dave's champion. He made a move to seize a brick and hurl it. Then he changed his mind as Hiram started a run for him. "There's a bully for you," announced the country boy, stooping to pick up a little box he had placed on the ground when he ran to Dave's rescue. "Good thing I happened around." "Yes, he acted pretty vicious," replied Dave. "He's mad because he lost his place and wants to scare me off from taking it." "Don't you let him do it." "I won't." "So you got a job with Mr. King?" questioned Hiram, his face lengthening a trifle. "Yes," answered Dave. "You see—" "You're smarter than me, yes. A blind owl could see that. And I'm right glad of it," added Hiram heartily. "Some day I'll hit it just as lucky. Oh, say," and Hiram grinned drolly, "you tell Mr. King that I know what a biplane is now." "Do you indeed?" "Yes, and the difference between a pylon and an aileron, and lots of other things. And I'm going to learn a heap more," declared Hiram confidently. "Then you've begun your education already, have you?" "The man Mr. King sent me to hired me right on the spot. There isn't much to do here, but I'm to go with his crew to Dayton, and so all around the circuit. $6 a week, and keep, and commission." "What's doing?" "Helping in the restaurant and peddling novelties. I can't be idle, so I'm trying to start an honest penny rolling amongst the stragglers around the grounds," and Hiram tapped the box under his arm. "What have you got there?" inquired Dave. "Souvenirs," explained Hiram, opening the cover of the box and displaying a lot of pins and buttons bearing or stamped with miniature airships. "You'll do," declared Dave heartily. "And thank you for sending that Dawson fellow out about his business." "All right, and you look out for him. He'll do some mischief if he can." Dave went on his way with a word of good cheer to Hiram. He felt that they were bound soon to meet again, and prized the manly qualities of his new acquaintance. As he neared the hangars, 2 automobiles flashed past him. "Hello!" cried Dave. "And that first one is my friend Dollinger, with a cameraman and his traps. Mr. Alden's group are in the second machine." Dave reached Mr. King's quarters to find the second automobile halted there. The other one, guided by Dollinger, he noticed had driven over to a clear stretch at the far end of the grounds. Motion pictures, of course, thought Dave, and just then the man who had acted the Indian in the motion scene of the day previous recognized him. "Hello," he hailed. "You're on time. Going to help us out today?" "I don't know. I hope so," replied Dave, and he returned the friendly nods of the lady and the others in the party. "We're waiting for Mr. Alden," explained the man who had first spoken to Dave. "I think he expects to be here soon with Mr. King," said Dave. Then he moved around to the part of the building where the airship was housed, as he saw a man in overalls pottering about the open doors. "I saw you with Mr. King," said the man as Dave came up. "Going to work for him?" "I think so," answered Dave. "Well, you look a likely one. Seen much of airships?" "Almost nothing until this morning," replied Dave. "Well, I'll show you the last word in aerial construction when I introduce you to the Aegis," said the man. "Here, I'll give you a look at the beauty." Dave moved as gingerly about the machine as if it were made of porcelain. His companion pointed out the main features of the splendid piece of mechanism. Dave heaved a great sigh as he came out from the exhibition. He was fairly fascinated with what he had seen and what had been explained to him. Mr. King and the motion picture manager came up a minute later. They talked together. Then Mr. King got into the automobile with the others. "All oiled up and ready, Mason?" he called to the caretaker of the hangars. "All ready, Mr. King." "Then run her down to where you see the automobile. Dashaway will give you some help." "It seems just like a dream, all this," ruminated Dave as he assisted Mason in propelling the monoplane down the course. The sky was clear with a moderate breeze. The day was cool and bright. For the time, Dave forgot all the past, and a rare golden future seemed spreading out before him. Soon the Aegis was in place where the Aviator wanted it. Dave listened with interest to the talk of the motion picture man. He soon understood that they were to take a series of pictures, bringing in something of a story. "We will work out all the interiors at our city studio," explained the manager. "What we want to do here is to picture out— here it is," and the speaker read over his scenario. "Scene in prison yard. Convict at the rock pile." "That's me," announced the man who had acted as the hunter's part the day before. "Get in trim, then," ordered the manager. The actor went behind one of the automobiles, where there was a large wardrobe trunk. In a minute or two he reappeared, arrayed as the typical convict. The cameraman had produced from his properties various needed articles.